you would desperately like a world-class system, so you would ride in public transportation. Good, good. So would I, so would we.
What brought me out here was the opportunity to get insight into what's going on with the Chicago rapid transit system from people that know.
I like the concept of dialogue being carried on in a setting like this.
Just an opportunity to talk about, Chicago transit at an inflection point with a new mayor and a new, a president that knows Chicago issues at least, or is interested in urban issues.
If you look around the world at what cities are doing, they're hiring the world's greatest architects to design their subway systems.
Design does come at an expense. And unfortunately, this country does not support transit as well as many other countries around the world.
I also want to take a look at design in a different way so that we don't talk about it just as aesthetics, but how a station is designed to make it functional. What kind of things are there?
Service, service, service. Put service on the street. Build capacity. Increase frequency. To have service, you must have maintenance.
If I could change one thing about public transit, I would make sure that there was reliability.
A nicely designed station, when you see one that works, you can buy stuff there, you can shop there, you can drop your stuff off at the cleaners, and that helps, I think, get to the service question that Chris talked about, in that it isn't just necessarily one thing, it's a myriad of things.
And I think that because the city has such a proud architectural tradition, I think if the political leaders will allow it, we will be able to have some good design out of that.
The idea that good design has to cost so much money, I don't agree with that, and I think that if we got our costs in line with Tier 1 cities around the world, we would have plenty of money to invest in other things.
How much money would it cost to make the CTA what it should be?
We need $10 billion is what the RTA has said, just to get it into a state of good repair, and then we have to maintain that.
To maintain it, we should be spending about $26 billion over the next 10 years.
Here's the bad news. The state has never created a single identifiable source of this maintenance money. And you get into spats in Springfield, sometimes between Republicans and Democrats, sometimes between Democrats and Democrats. And what suffers is the bolt that's holding up a bridge where there's a metro train crossing the Des Plaines River.
Oh, God. I was a transportation planner for 20 years. And the biggest thing, obviously, with the CTA is a state of good repair.
I think the state is ultimately responsible, and despite the financial problems of the state, that's where the support has to come from.
The federal government has been a very consistent supporter of infrastructure in transit, and they're questioning why. Why, from a federal perspective, should they be putting so much money into transit, which is mostly a local concern? But if we're not ponying up our fair share locally and at the state level to match what the federal government is doing, that undermines our credibility.
And one of the things that we have to do is not just look at levying a tax on everybody, but making it more difficult for cars to get into the city.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just say, we've got a question here from one of you. What about congestion pricing? Charge motorists to enter the city and use the money on public transportation.
Perfect.
Yeah?
But here's where leadership and planning and phasing become important. Because although I'd like to say that with congestion pricing, I'm sticking the fat cat who's in the back of his limousine heading to Lake Forest with the price of my transportation system in the city. The reality is, though, is that who you're really sticking up is the poor guy who lives in Harvey or Cicero, who doesn't make much, and he happens to have a job near O'Hare, and he has to drive because there is no way to get from point A to point B but driving.
It's about a much more vital relationship between the private marketplace and the public subsidy and the authority that regulates how the service is put on the street.
I'd love to see Metra and CTA get together and be able to be an integrated system. It's fairly miserable that, I've got my, reasonably expensive CTA pass that I can't use to go to Mayfair.
This is my Metra pass, which is punched like we live in the 1800s, and this is my CTA pass. And if I got more money on this, and I got enough holes punched on this, I can throw this away. If I got money on this, I can't use it with this.
The city gets to run the CTA like it's its own fiefdom. The suburbs get to run Metra and Pace. And so that, it's kind of just been we'll agree, and the mayor gets to control the airports completely. And if anybody wants to build a suburban airport, we're going to port there, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and and then we'll form a. So I think that we've really had this tremendous bifurcation, and we have to think more regionally.
People are talking about New York. In New York, the MTA can fire the head of Long Island Railroad. And that's why Long Island Railroad relates to Metro North. And that's why the whole system holds together. We're nuts in this city, and I love this city. But we've got cognitive nutso planning because nobody works for one outfit.
What we're going to need to see is someone willing to make the kind of hard decisions that will allow this to be a regional transit system, and not be afraid to offend somebody in the suburbs or offend some of the people in the city. Say that we have to make some sacrifices in order to make this work.
I think they could really benefit from fresh ideas, so they need to hire younger people like us and push the older people out the door.
Okay, we're going to go around the table and talk to Mayor Rahm Emanuel. He calls you up, he brings you to his office, you get 3 minutes with him. He wants to know how to fix public transportation in this region. And what do you tell him, Libe?
For him to understand what the system really is, and he's done campaign stops at L's, which was great. He needs to ride the thing, and he needs to figure out what it is. And it doesn't come from people talking to him. It doesn't come from aides or former aides talking to him. It comes from riding it and getting a sense of it for himself.
Let the CTA know that whatever has happened in the past, that's ancient history. Going forward from today, it cannot waste a dime. Build support in the region for a dedicated funding source for our capital needs.
Fundamentally, people don't care if it's the train or the car or a bike or walking. They want to be able to get where they're going. So we need to think about an integrated transportation system. And I would actually say my first priority is probably not public transit in terms of where I think he can make bigger impacts on other areas at a lower cost, given the budget deficit. Probably in terms of bicycling, like bike share and public protected bike lanes.
You have to see this grand vision of wonderfully designed stations, and that's one thing you can look at, but you also have to think small. You have to you have to make these little fixes. You have to make sure that the system's maintained. You have to make sure that you have trains that make sense for people.
I'd like to see Rahm take the leadership with the CEOs in this city, convince them to step forward with him, go to Washington, go to Springfield, and tell them that transit here in Chicago, and actually in every major city in the country, is key to economic recovery. Disinvesting in our transit system right now is not good for our recovery. It's not going to create jobs. It's going to go in the other direction.
All right, so Rahm's going to get an earful, huh? We'll send a videotape of this evening to him. Thank you all for coming out for this and making a difference. Together we can improve the system. Thank you. We'll see you in the subway.